Artificial intelligence is the simulation of human intelligence processes by machines, especially computer systems. Specific applications of AI include expert systems, natural language processing, speech recognition, and machine vision. When you think about AI, something like this might come to your mind. And if you are the paranoid kind of person, you might be sweating your ass off in the fear of a robot uprising.
I will destroy humans.
When in reality, most of them are like this. Well, in video games, artificial intelligence or AI is used to generate responsive, adaptive, or intelligent behaviors primarily in non-player characters or NPCs. It serves to improve the game player experience rather than machine learning or decision making. You might think, in this day and age, AI in video games would be something mind-blowing. But they are something along the line of the clip that you saw in the beginning. AI has been the part of video games, well, since the dawn of video games. When it started way back in the 1950s, one of the more popular examples of a video game that used AI can be of Pac-Man, where you played as this little yellow fucker who only had a head, and you have to collect all the dots before the aliens devours you. There have been numerous games that have came out since then, which have used AI in different ways to implement in their games. There are various other game genres that use it in a pretty interesting way, even though they are far from perfect, but overall they're pretty good if compared to video games that fall under the spectrum of open world or first person shooter. The former one can be a prime suspect of games that try to do something that is way too complex. But that's not the topic I wanted to talk about. And by the title of this video, you can already assess what I'm gonna focus on. Every video game uses artificial intelligence to some degree to make the games seem more immersive. But the two game genres that I mentioned earlier are the ones that face the most problems. The issues that open world or games that boasts a huge map, which nobody is going to explore, suffer from is pretty self-explanatory. They try to achieve their ambitious dream of making something mind-boggling, but all it does is make their game look goofy. Well, the other video game genre has a lot going on for itself, so let's dive into that. FPS video games. Well, you might say that there aren't any AI in most of the FPS games. Per se, it's true. The FPS games that are popular in current times don't focus on that. They're usually free to play that prioritize in PvP rather than PvE aspects. But those games aren't the focal point of this video. So let's just set them aside and move on to the other type of FPS games, the story-driven ones. Games from franchises like Call of Duty or Battlefield. Some of them, particularly the older titles, had a decent functioning AI going on for them. But there is a slight problem with AI in such games. They are not that important. The storyline and the characters is what carries those games. Used to carry those games. Now, it's a different scenario. Most of the time, the AI is just there to stop you to go from point A to point B, to keep the players on their toes with enough sooty in between all the cutscenes. You can change the difficulty to make things more interesting, but all it does is increase their health and somehow make their bullets suddenly do more damage, and give them aim assist to such a degree that it will put console players to shame. It's not like every FPS or games with FPS elements have AI like that. One quick search about video games with good AI would lead you to a game by the name of First Encounter Assault Recon or Fear. It is a survival horror first-person shooter game that came out in 2005 and still boasts one of the most innovative AI ever seen in a video game, which makes the immersion of the game reach an unsurmountable height, something which is really necessary for a good horror game. Another game which is really popular and considered one of the best video games of all time and has a good AI is the Half-Life series. In Fear, the AI was programmed to get the best out of their surroundings to create a suspenseful atmosphere. And in Half-Life, the way the AI reacts to you makes it seem real. They are extremely well written and respond in a way which depends on how you choose to react to them, which makes them feel sentient to some degree, as they use methodical ways to deal with you. But the problem with these two video games is that they're not truly a FPS game. And that brings us to the third type of FPS games. Well, technically, it's not that different from the first or second variant. But these games tend to focus a bit more on the AI part, tactical shooting games. A good example for that can be the Arma series. It's a bit more on the extreme side of it. The game gets as realistic as you would want it to be. It's not like these type of games are just PvE based, but they do have those options available. Personally, I'm a huge fan of games that lie between casual and tactical shooters. Something like Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege, which takes the best of both sides. But again, the AI in that game just feels underdeveloped. But there is a game which has a good amount of tactical elements to keep it real, and at the same time is casual enough to keep things entertaining. And ironically, it was developed by the same company who made Siege. It's even in the same franchise. Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Vegas 2. It had everything I like about FPS games. The in-depth weapon customization, exciting close-quarter combat, or the challenging enough AI bots. That game brought back the fun I used to have while playing FPS games. There was a similar game like that which I used to play around the same time, which did some things better than Vegas 2 and some it didn't. Insurgency, which was developed by New World Interactive. While Vegas 2 came out in 2008, Insurgency was released pretty recent in 2014. But it wasn't the first installment of Insurgency. It all started when Jeremy Blum and Andrew Spearin made a total conversion mod for the source engine. It was called Insurgency Modern Infantry Combat. They started the development way back in 2002 and finished it by 2007. The surprising popularity of the mod made the development of Insurgency possible. When it comes to gameplay or game modes, Insurgency wasn't that different from the games of its time. It was a multiplayer first-person shooter which looked pretty similar to Counter-Strike Source, as it used the same game engine which was made by Valve. But what made it stand out from all the other games was that it looked very simple. The screen wasn't cluttered with a mini-map, player health or ammunition counter, nor a virtual crosshair, something that almost every FPS games have. Insurgency, in any sense, wasn't supposed to be an easy game. It focused more on realism and harsh difficulty, where almost every weapon was extremely accurate and deadly, and after your character died, there wasn't an instant respawn, which made every death a bit more painful. Even though it wasn't a fully fledged military simulation tactical shooter, it really made you feel like it was one, with its realistic sound design that makes you feel like you are in an actual war. Well, with all of that out of the way, let's focus on the part that made me want to make a video about it. There were primarily 3 reasons why I loved playing this game. First one being the weapon customization, second being the sound design, and the third one is the reason why I made this video, the AI. To make things clear, I'm going to be focusing on the offline aspects of this game, so things like versus in the multiplayer mode are set aside. At the beginning of every game, you're given the choice to choose a certain class, and each one of them had different sets of weapons and accessories which you can customize, which were bought by supply points. There are 5 different modes you can play in the co-op section. I don't particularly remember which one I liked the most, but what I do remember is that all of them were fun. Even if you played with just the AI teammates, there is a function that you can use to command other players on how to tactically handle the situation. But as you're talking about playing with bots, they were just a bit dumb with following those instructions. No. They are hilariously dumb. If you regularly play video games, then you will relate to what I'm about to say. There are certain items in games which, when used by the AI, particularly a boss, is most of the time extremely effective against you. But when you acquire them, they're just lame or doesn't match with what you had to face. This is extremely prevalent in Insurgency. There isn't any problem with the weapons or other accessories that you get to use, but there is a huge difference on how the AI in the opposing team and the ones in your team plays. On the one hand, the bots in the enemy team will use tactical methods to get you by flanking from different directions and effectively using all the utility items to take advantage. While on the other hand, you've got the bots in your team who are busy doing this. So, when it comes to relying on your teammates to do anything of value, just don't count on them. They're only useful when you're reloading in a tough situation, or when you are dead and have to hope that they somehow defeat the enemy team so you can respawn. But other than that, they're just there so you don't get annihilated by the bots on the opposite team. Insurgency is not a fast-paced run-em and gun-em type of shooter, no matter what mode you play. Most of the enemy AI lurk in the corners and are easily alerted by your footsteps if you're sprinting. So, crouching not only helps to aim more accurately, but to keep your location hidden too, as there is no minimap to assist you of yours or any enemy's location. You have to go by from what you hear, and the incredible sound design helps a lot. If you're nearby, you can hear the AI communicate with each other, whether to send someone to check where the noise came from, or to throw a grenade to pin you down into a certain location. No matter what game mode you played, none of them were forgiving at all. It would constantly throw you in tough situations where quick and smart decisions must be made to stay alive. Every weapon in this game is lethal, so unless the AI does something dumb, you wouldn't be able to survive. Headshots by almost all the weapons in any difficulty is a direct kill, which made even the smallest decision count, as any mistake would lead your character to death. The game really doubles down on the realism part, which escalates how the AI feel in the game. But once you understand the basic fundamentals of the game, you can easily get hold of how to play it without dying in seconds. Beyond the well-made AI and realistic features, which might make it look a bit tough, is just a basic security forces versus the insurgents forces, where you have to do typical objectives that these type of games tend to have. It doesn't bring anything entirely new to the whole done and dusted concept, but the way it goes around it to change bits and pieces makes it into something that is extremely entertaining. I don't want to sound like one of those people who really like realistic shooters as if they are in an actual army, as most of those type of games aren't that fun to play. They just sound nice on paper. But Insurgency almost perfected the formula of keeping it real while making it fun at the same time. There is a reason as to why I said almost perfected the formula, as I have covered almost all the things that this game does well. We can move on as to why there are quotation marks on the word best in the title. When it comes to good AI in video games, there are many options that can rank above Insurgency. Fear has really innovative AI even if compared to games that are released nowadays, whereas Half-Life has one of the best interactive AI in a video game ever. I know there are other games which have good AIs, but these two were ingenious for the time that they came out, while Insurgency is just plain and simple, more entertaining as a FPS game. To some, it might look or sound a bit too much on the realistic side, but in any way, it's not something similar to a milsim like the Arma games. It just takes all the enjoyable features from those type of games to make something which is quite similar to Escape from Tarkov, where playing with even the bots is pretty fun. But out of all the FPS games that I've mentioned in this video and the ones that I played before, Insurgency ranks above all of them in the gameplay sector. There are numerous things that makes it better than those games, but the AI is something that none of those games possess, at least up to the standards of Insurgency. Having no single player campaign is a big plus, as the developers didn't have to focus or put any resources behind that, and that gave them more time on making a pretty competent AI. It's not perfect in any manner, neither is the whole game. There are bugs and things can get a bit janky sometimes. It might seem unfair in some moments and in others pretty funny. And if you get bored of all the AI in offline co-op mode, you can try all the modded servers, which was another factor that made this game really popular. As it was made in the source engine, it was pretty easy to change anything, from maps to enemy bots. Personally, I didn't mind the maps in the vanilla game, as they did a fine job to give a close quarter action, something that is immensely better than getting shot from the different end of the map. Well, my memory is a bit foggy, as I didn't play that much of online modded co-op servers. Look, I'm scared of social interaction, even if it's online. And there was another reason too. But sometimes I did risk the chance of getting social anxiety to play a couple of rounds there, as the AI in some of those servers were a bit more polished. They tend to feel more adaptive of the situation rather than following some stoic scripted routines. If you knew about Insurgency before this video, then you might know that the developers made two more tactical FPS games. One of them was Days of Infamy, and the other one is a sequel to Insurgency, which came out in 2018. You might be thinking that if it's a sequel to Insurgency, then why I didn't choose that game? Well, the problem with Insurgency Sandstorm is that even though it's an improvement to its prequel, the AI seems to feel a bit more dodgy, at least in the offline co-op mode. There is an improvement as to how your teammates play, but the enemy AI is just weird. This video would get unnecessarily long if I went deep into that. But if you were given the option to buy one game out of these two, I would personally advise to go for Insurgency if you like playing offline co-op mode. But if you want something that looks better, has better sound design, comes with more maps, more weapons and attachments to choose from, and an active player base with lots of interesting modded servers, then go for Insurgency Sandstorm. Neither one of these games have mind-boggling AI that acts human-like, but the 2014 title seems to have a better grasp at having good enough bots without the help of modded servers, as in Sandstorm, the offline co-op mode gets boring pretty fast. There are hundreds of tactical shooters that are available online, so why choose Insurgency, a game that is almost 7 years old with a very small active fan base? The multiplayer servers aren't going to be fun for various reasons, but if you have had enough of all the scripted and lame AI that most single-player FPS games have, then Insurgency will provide you with the most entertainment that an FPS game can give. The game has been developed with so much care, even into the small details. You can clearly see that the developer had taken a lot of consideration while making this game. From an AI that to AI